Hello. Are we live? Are we there? We are live. Hello, H3O. Hello, Australia. And hello to my wonderful panel for tonight. If you are just tuning in, you are some of the first to tune in. So we're really, really pleased to see you. And what would really help us just as we're getting this going, because believe it or not, Andrew is not the best at technology in the world. If you could just let us know that you can hear us, that you can see us, and that all is well. If there's any problems at all, just write in massive capitals, we can't hear you, we can't see you, and then we'll go for it. But welcome to our 8 p.m. We had a great gathering earlier. And let me just quickly introduce you to our panel. So if you just say your name and where you're watching from, and maybe who's in the house with you, go for it.
Hello, I'm Lyndall and I am at home in Allambie Heights, and I am at home with my husband Paul and my 3 boys, Harry, Judah and Asher.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm also at home. I'm here with my husband who's with the crying baby in the background. Hopefully you can't hear too much. Her name's Thea and Artie's asleep in bed.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm also at home. Jan is here on the couch and Tim's upstairs. He's not watching.
Lovely. Well, welcome. I'm here in DY. Alex is here. She's upstairs. Mum and Dad are upstairs watching. So it's great to be with you all tonight. We are observing social distancing with technology. So we were going to run around with 1.5 meter like measuring sticks and try and sit around a table. We just couldn't make it work. So we decided to go live on Zoom tonight. So we're looking forward to see how this goes. If it goes well, we'll probably do it again in the coming weeks. We're going to have some fun tonight as we get to meet you and meet each other. But just to say, this is a really difficult time. Our country, our world is going through some really difficult stuff at the moment. And what we're trying to do tonight is have a bit of a conversation, think a little bit about how we can help as a church. What can we practically do, particularly in the light of the government's announcements earlier on. Then we're going to hear, Linda was going to read a story from the Bible, and I'm just going to share some brief reflections on it, and we're going to finish with a prayer. Feel free to come and go as you please, but what would really help us is if you comment and ask questions, and we'll try and respond to those questions either towards the end or as we go. So that's kind of the vibe of tonight. But just to start, one of the things we'd love for you to do for people that are tuning in, and we're noticing, hi Kate, hi Renee, hi Laura, lovely to see you. Why don't you send us a photo of what you're doing now, who you're watching with. Do you have Gogglebox in Australia, guys? Is there Gogglebox here?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You do?
Yes.
Wonderful. So if you could take, if you're at home, not you guys in the panel, but if you're watching live, why don't you take a photo, like Gogglebox style, of you and your family watching this live stream, post them below, and everyone can join in and see what's going on. The idea of this is to build community and to explore a little bit, but also to pray and take the opportunity to focus on God. All right. With that in mind, we've got a challenge, because what the problem is with the Facebook Live is people take a little bit of time to make their fruit tea or their dinner or their beer or just get ready for the live stream. So we thought we'd have a bit of what you Australians call flim flam. Is that right, Andrew?
Well, we don't call it flim flam. I think we call it very serious business. Australians don't do humour, Dan. We're very serious people.
Yeah. I have to be really careful how I respond to that, right?
You do. You're trapped.
So in the UK, we have this game. I don't know if you have it here. We call it football, but I think you guys call it soccer. And basically, loads of soccer players and loads of like famous people around the world have been doing the toilet roll keep up challenge. I saw someone do it the other day, and it was immense. A guy called Sammy. So he inspired me, and I thought we could try it live tonight. So I know I kind of pre-warned some of the panel. Are you all up for this? Is everyone up? Have you got your toilet rolls ready? Just hold them up. Yeah, well done, Andrew. Kate?
Kate, come on, Kate.
Kate, are you in?
I don't have one. They're all sold out.
Now that is
Tough times.
that's not flim flam. That's flimsy, Kate.
I'm also
we
in
get,
Vagina Pants.
If we get 2,000 views on this video, Kate promises that she'll go live tomorrow or Tuesday, and I'll go around and film it doing keep ups. Does that sound fair?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
If
great.
someone brings the toilet paper.
Yeah. So who wants to go first? Linda, I think you'd be great to kick us off. Here's the challenge. Because I play football, and I'm English, I'm supposed to be good, though I'm really not. I tried this earlier and I did like 2. I need to do more keep ups than you two put together. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
And if I do, you guys will sing the national anthem.
What national anthem?
Done.
Great. Linda, we'll take it away. See if we
Well,
can get a
I'm going to
nice
throw.
camera shot.
I'm going to throw a spanner in the works, and as I am an avid soccer mum, I am going to sub in my son.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Harry's going to do it. Off we go.
Just joined. Wait, Harry. Wait. If you've just joined, this is Toilet Roll Challenge live. We will be talking about serious things in a minute, but this is really important. This is kind of like the World Cup of the Toilet Roll Challenge. So go for it, Harry.
Right, when I move back a little bit. Okay. Oh,
Right, we'll try that one again. That's good. Yeah.
try again. He has been training.
Mulligan.
All right, that was 2. Round of applause for Harry. Woo! If we can have some virtual emojis and just a big holler on there, that would be great as well. My auntie's just joined, I think, from Scotland. How exciting. Andrew, go for it.
Well, Dan, I have been known to cheat in the past, and bad luck.
Don't confess that on the internet. Oh, I see.
I counted 15.
Ooh.
16 to beat. This is
But
going to be a challenge.
I'll cut you some slack, seeing I might have cheated in, let's say, 7.
Okay, I reckon I'm going to struggle to beat Harry. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ready? Go for it. Countdown.
5,
Oh, 4.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Go.
2, 6.
Well done.
Very good.
That is the best I've done so far. I promise I haven't been planning this all day. Cool. So take it away, guys.
What am I doing?
Where's the script?
Yeah.
Starts God Save. No, I'm joking. Do you? Just a quick show of hands for the panel. Do you know the English national anthem?
You mean God Save the Queen?
Yeah.
The words.
I think I could probably mumble my way through.
Yeah, nice. I know the Australian one, but I'm not going to sing it because I don't know that well. And this is a serious live cast, so we're gonna move on to that. But just as we were kind of chatting the other day, one of the things that's come in from our community is like this idea of how we can respond as a church. And if you're tuning in now live, we'd love for you to type ideas of how we can help as a church. What can a small community of people that can be incredibly effective do to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak as we try and serve our community and others around our country? But the other thing that I've noticed is some just really great kind of helpful advice to kind of keep us sane while we're working from home. So I kind of generally work from home anyway, but I had some ideas that come in. I don't know if you guys had heard.
We're frozen.
Had any ideas about how we can isolate well? Oh, sorry. Yeah, how we can keep. Are we still live? Great. Yeah, so give me a wave. Sorry, someone just rang me. So did you guys have any ideas? Did anything come up like your end about how we can work well from home? How can we stay sane? Maybe people could comment as well.
Well, it's not dissimilar to maternity leave. I'll just put it out there.
I hear you.
Yeah. You're kind of going stir crazy at home
no.
anyway.
Yeah, we have
Andrew, we don't get to
unpredictable
comment on that.
colleagues.
I
We
can
do.
only comment from when I've had an operation and been in plaster or something like that. So
Yeah. Okay, so Kate and Lyndall, take it away.
Oh, gosh. I'm terrible at working from home. I tried flexible working for a time, and I was actually really, really bad at it. And so over the last few weeks, self-isolating has been a real challenge for me. I mean, we haven't gone whole hog and shut ourselves in at home. We've been out every day and gone for a walk or gone and explored somewhere new in Sydney, and that's been helpful. Yeah, especially with an active 4-year-old, getting out has been important, but I know that's a bit of a luxury.
Yeah. Lyndall, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's pretty similar. There are so many things that are unpredictable about trying to work from home with other people around, little people that need you. And sometimes that's really unpredictable. So that's tricky, but I guess I've just learned to be quite flexible and really, I used to be quite a procrastinator, but I find now with those moments that I get, I've just really got to bunker down and focus. And just be kind to yourself as well. When you get to the end of the day and you haven't ticked off those things off your list and got to those things that you had anticipated, to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think being kind to ourselves is so key at this time. And I think the exercise bit is worth bearing in mind. We've just had great suggestion from Sally Gardner online saying jogging breaks. So even if you're like stuck in your unit or like in your house, like kind of if you've got any bit of outside space, just run up and down that. Or particularly if you've got kids, I'll try and make a running track for Isla through the living room just to let off that energy, because we know that's good for our mental health, don't we? We had some other ideas come in. So one of them was a conference called Bingo, which I'll ask Lauren Saunders. This is one of her ideas. If you could just post the link for conference call Bingo just below, that would be really helpful, because then people can use that. So the idea is that you pick out certain words on a conference call and just tick them off. Maybe you want to play that today as well while we're doing this live stream. The other one, which I thought was really helpful, was this idea to set aside 5 minutes at the start of each call just for the kind of chat that you'd have in an office environment to catch up about how people are getting on, how their families are, perhaps talk about dreams and aspirations, or just have a chat at the start of meetings rather than getting straight down to business. And I know, Andrew, when we chatted on Zoom the other day, we kind of had a similar conversation, didn't we? Where we just got straight into it, and you helpfully pointed out that it'd be great to just hang out at some point. So I think we need to learn to hang out on technology well in this time and think about what that might look like. Any other ideas, Andrew? Have you got anything for us?
Well, I suppose because we have quite a few young people with young families, so rather than jogging, perhaps we could do a push-up challenge with one of the children on their back. So that will be harder for some than others. I'm thinking about maybe Paul with Harry on his back, but you with Isla on your back wouldn't be so bad. But I think certainly
maybe Jan with you on her back.
Yeah. But I think like we've got so used maybe to just use text and things like that, and I think now we have to really use FaceTime or Messenger or WhatsApp or Duo, or any of those things to actually better look at people and talk to people rather than just and almost throw text aside as much as possible. Because this is a much better way than text. Because as you say, we missed that little bit of conversation. Tragically, as you would know, Dan, that most sporting codes across the world have been shut down. And being an avid AFL person, that would have been the first, not 5 minutes, but maybe 50 minutes of my working day talking about that. So I have to find something to replace that.
Yeah.
The go-to small talk.
Yeah.
How about that? I mean, I quite like that as a question, like, because then I was trying to talk about what small talk might look like. I couldn't think of anything. So can you give us good ideas, like the people that are watching at home, like what's good small talk? Let's not always talk about COVID-19, though we're about to. in this live cast.
So
But
true.
it feels like that's all we talk about at the moment, right? So give us some good ideas for small talk, and if they're really good, we may even have a little like after hours session on here at the end of the live cast. So yeah. So sort of moving on, what we want to do tonight is hear from all of our panel, and these guys have been picked because they're kind of experts in a particular field. Well, Lyndall and Kate are. Andrew, we're still working that out, but and I'm certainly not. But no, genuinely, these guys have got a lot to offer. And when we think about, I suppose as a church, we've been doing this series called Praxis, and praxis in essence means when theory becomes action. And so we're thinking as a church, what does it look like for faith to become action? This is one of my first series at a church, and Kate's husband, John, came up with the name, and we knew that it was right straight away, because we want to think about, as Christians, how can we not just talk the talk, but walk the walk? And it strikes me that during this, our response to COVID-19 is an opportunity to do that. Not just an opportunity, something that we have to do, that we're required to do. And so we're going to be thinking a bit about that tonight and try and balance that really well with wisdom and being sensible, but also put our faith into action. And so what we're going to do is we'll go around and hear from each of the panel and discuss for a bit each of their specialist subjects. So Lyndall, we spoke a little bit on the phone about this the other day. Do you want to just share a little bit about your background, like what you've done for work, some of the really interesting projects you've been involved in, and then perhaps just think a little bit about what that means in the light of COVID-19. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So my background, for those of you that don't know, is in mental health. I'm an occupational therapist by trade, and I was working this out, and it makes me feel very old, but around 17 years I've worked in mental health now in a variety of different settings, in hospitals, in the community, with different groups of people. And I guess it's something I'm really passionate about, not just that space, but I guess journeying alongside people that have an experience of mental distress, whatever that might look like. And certainly through my professional experience, I guess, I've learned a lot from those people that I've journeyed alongside. And supporting people's recovery, mental health recovery, for me has been about, not about me bringing expertise into the situation, but acknowledging that I might have a learned expertise, but I'm working with people that have a lived expertise. And those two things can come together really well or not so well. And it's something that my journey, I guess, in this field has been around learning from the lived expertise of people and journeying with people as opposed to doing stuff to them, if that makes sense. Yes, that's a bit of my background.
That's really helpful. And I think the challenge is, I mean, I would say mental health is, like at the church I worked at previously, like we found that there was a high percentage of people that struggled with their mental health. We did loads of work around that. And so this has been something that's, I think, been on the church's radar, particularly in the last few years. It doesn't mean that there weren't mental health challenges before, but I think partly because of awareness and partly because of technology, that seems to be kind of heightened. And then if you add in this kind of COVID-19 piece, which is just crazy, right? The things that are happening at the moment are unprecedented. Even the fact that we're gathering for church now online, like the church has gathered for 2,000 years, like on and off. And we're still going to gather today. We're gathering now, but this is unusual. This is different. I feel like, particularly for those with mental health difficulties, and I would include myself in that, like these are difficult times. Could you respond to that and just speak into that a bit, Lyndall? Yeah,
and look, I've been thinking about this, as I know a lot of other people have been too, this idea of social distancing, and what that means for us as human beings who are built for relationships and for connection. And interaction with one another. What does that look like now? What does that look like on an online platform where, for me as a hugger, this has been really difficult the last few weeks, and that need for physical connection and a way to, sit with people in distress, and also for others to sit with me in sometimes my distress. Like, what does that look like now? And I think that's going to be interesting times ahead. A lot of the secular research around mental health recovery is around relationships and connectedness. So when we are in a time which is really distressing and anxiety levels are really high, and there are so many things going on for people and impacts on themselves, their families and beyond, what does it look like to engage in relationships and that connected? I think that's going to be a really important question for us to grapple with as individuals and us as collectively. How do we do community? How do we do that stuff in this new current environment?
Yeah, and I know I was talking to someone earlier, and they were talking about some of the coping mechanisms that surround people that have mental health challenges, and that some of them in this space of isolation or self-distancing are reduced, and that can be a huge challenge. Did you others want to speak into this or throw anything in? That there's no need to, but
yeah, I had a question for you, Lyndall, which was, I was speaking to a friend over the weekend who's really concerned about self-isolating with a partner or a housemate or other with pretty serious mental health issues, and the burden is now on them to be the support person, because they're the only person they're coming in contact with. Like, they were, I guess, looking to me to give them some support and some advice on how to be that for them, but to find space for themselves. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I think one of the good things of the last few years is that a lot of mental health support organisations have gone into the kind of digital sphere, especially some of the more youth-focused services, but it doesn't mean that people who aren't youth can access those. And I think there's some really useful things out there. There's forums that people can engage with in terms of that peer support as well, which is incredibly important in the mental health space, having support from someone that has that lived expertise as well as engaging with professionals. So I think perhaps in some ways that the mental health world is well equipped in that regard, because there are so many things that are available online, both programs, but also like people as well. And I know in my work, that's something we've grappled with in going to an online space is, hang on, we know that the relationship and the therapeutic relationship with someone, with a professional, or the relationship people have with their support people is really important. How do we kind of bring that into the mental health space? So that's been thought about quite a bit. So I think there are a lot of resources out there, and perhaps something that's following this, Dan, is something I can do is put together some of that stuff to send out. Just thinking
that'd be so good. Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, off the back of this, it would be really great to make those resources available. And if others have got ideas and they want to feed into that, either send them into hello@h3o.church and I'll pass them on to Lyndall, or you'll probably find her on Facebook. And if you know her, even better, send that stuff over. A really good question came in, kind of linked to that in our last conversation from Renee, which was about personal space at home. Me and Alex are kind of both working from home now, and we thought about picking up a desk off the side of the road, sanitizing it first, and then putting it in our bedroom because we got a bit of space in there. But then we realized, like, we didn't want that space to necessarily be a workspace, and that might affect us in different ways. But how do we create space at home so that when we're at home, we're relaxing, and when we're at work, we're working? I mean, one way is to use separate spaces, but I don't know if others have ideas around that.
I think having a pre-thought routine of some sort, like some structure and thought around your day as well, to set some boundaries around work. It's like I've always had an opportunity to work from home, but to be honest, I've found it easier to go to work because then it kind of boundaries that space for me and my headspace, and also the drive in to and from work has been a bit of a a wind down or wind up, if that makes sense. So I think it's about us thinking, how do we do that within our home, and how do we set those boundaries, whether they're physical or whether they're in our mind as well? How do we do that? So I think having some thought around that and having some intention around that is probably going to be something that's really important for all of us.
Yeah, that's good. It's really helpful. Andrew, did you want to add anything to this mini section?
Or to that space around the working from home thing, I suppose it's very much going to depend on how much space you have in your home as well. So some people, if you're in a unit, then the difficulty is the space there is a difficulty in space. If you're in a house, then you can work outside. But I think Linda was probably right. You need to think, well, if you're both having to work from home and you've both got other responsibilities within the house as well, then you need to work about, well, I'll work, I'll start work earlier. I'm the person who likes getting up. I'll work earlier, you work later, but try to separate so you have that, you can use one room for that. And then the rest of the houses or the rest of the unit is just your normal life that you had before. And I think you've got to get out, to try to just get out. If you can stand on the balcony, stand out in the backyard, do you have to get some fresh air out of that? Just like you would if you worked in an office. You have to treat it the same way. You've got to be able to walk away from your desk and do something else for a while.
Yeah, it's good.
Do what you said before. Running up and down the hallway, or doing something else, like Sally suggested.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I just had one come in from Steve Clues, which was he said that they're doing virtual happy hour, like with their neighbours.
That's cool.
That's very
cool. I like that.
And of course, we've seen just some amazing videos from around the world, really, like people in Paris. My friend Dave, I don't know if he's on it, Dave Pambakian, lives in central Paris, and he said that, like, he posted a video the other day of them clapping the kind of health workers as they were coming home, like the doctors and the nurses, at 5 o'clock, and that became a tradition that people did every day. I saw a video of some people singing in like a kind of apartment block surrounding in Brazil, where they were just like worshipping. It was like a church kind of gathering, and we know it's a very Christian country in Brazil, but it's just beautiful to hear that. And we've tried to just with our neighbours be even more intentional, try and have that face-to-face contact. There are opportunities to do that, and almost in these next couple of days prepare for that isolation, to try and work out what connectivity looks like and cement those relationships, really, depending on how well you know your neighbours. So I think one of the opportunities, if that's the right word, of this time is, I don't know about you guys, but I'm noticing more about the people around me, what's going on in my street. And I think that's pretty special. We're all having to slow down and change our usual pace of things. And well, for me, it's the running from one thing to another. There's so many things that have been cancelled for us as a family over the last couple of weeks. And we've got this kind of margin now. Whilst there is uncertainty and there's the anxiety associated with that, that's very much something that's there as well. But there's this time to notice, which I think is cool. And I think that could create opportunities to then engage in ways that we maybe hadn't imagined or thought of before. Yeah, it's really helpful. And even having that positive mindset, right, is so hard to do. And it's not something that you should force yourself to do. Like, if you're sad, if you're scared, it's completely fine. But also sometimes that awareness, that trying to be thankful for even the smallest things can really help us through these difficult times. We're not wanting to put a bow on it or make it nice and neat and tidy, but just that awareness. I think we'll move on to Kate, if that's all right. And thanks for that, Linda. And again, just others, feel free to jump in with questions or comments at any time, and also online. If you've got any questions for any of our panelists, feel free to write them, and we'll try and collate them a bit more at the end. And I might need Alex's help for that, who's tapping away on there, so she can collate them if that helps. But Kate, do you want to just share a little bit about what you do for work and your kind of experience. Every time I talk to you, I'm amazed, and you use these words that I don't really understand, but then you're able to explain it in a way that someone like me that wouldn't understand some of that stuff can understand. And I'm always just so encouraged by your job. And in many ways, like when I talk to you, I think, oh, that's what we should be doing as a church. Like that's kind of that is church. That's kind of the vibe. Not that the church gets to claim everything. So that's what I'm saying. But Kate, do you want to? I'm going to shut up. Do you want to just share a little bit about you, and then we'll have a bit of a chat around that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an urban designer. I currently am on maternity leave, but usually I work in a private practice that does a lot of work with state government and local councils and with developers. So what an urban designer does is it's a bit of an intersection between architecture, strategic planning, and landscape architecture. And I guess what we're trying to do is, particularly with state government, think about urban renewal projects and large-scale redevelopments of sites, thinking about how we create equitable and accessible housing and transport, and essentially create cities for everybody where they're equitable and and so.
Can I jump in there? Because you used a phrase the other day when we were talking, which I thought was fascinating, really, in the light of everything that's been going on. But that, like, one of the chief aims of what you do was to, you'll phrase it better than me.
Yes. So we were talking a bit about particularly what I've been doing in my side project, which is more a bottom-up approach to strategic planning, and it's about using the community to understand what the needs are in the local area, and I guess the agency of people to shape their neighbourhoods as they're the expert. And I guess what I fundamentally believe out of that is that that's the best way communities can flourish and neighbourhoods can come together. And I guess, in this time it's been particularly challenging because my ambition in all of this is to bring people together. And so we're designing spaces and communities where people encounter each other on the street. And I guess we want those chance encounters, those informal interactions between strangers. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid at this time. So as this goes on, it'll be interesting to see how it shapes my profession, and even how we involve communities in planning.
And can I just jump in there, because I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on, just as you've reflected over the last couple of weeks on that very thing, that really your dream is to create these chance encounters, which I think is a good dream, and like I'm all in on it. I think it's great. When we've chatted over dinner and in different spaces, like I just think it's so good. But how have you reflected on those two pieces, chance encounters versus 1.5 meters?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think so. Behind all of that is this idea of placemaking, and it's like the collective ownership of space, and how we sort of forge our identities in space, and how we create this kind of sense of belonging that comes with the built environment. And I guess within that, you don't necessarily need the built environment and the landscape that we live in to do that. I do think it's key, and I mean it underpins my work, but creating communities and a sense of belonging that I guess, as Linda was saying, she's noticing things in her street, and I thought that was a really important point. Part of my ambition, and what this lady I really admire talks about, her name's Jane Jacobs, she says we have an urban ballet, and the way that we watch our neighbours and we see repetitive tasks, we know that the guy two doors down loves his car and he's always out in his garage tinkering. We know that, you know, at 7:30 at night, so-and-so walks her dog. We know these things. This kind of orchestrated sense that we know the place where we live. We know that these patterns start to emerge, create this sense of belonging, and I guess combat issues of isolation, which lead to, I guess, other mental health issues that, you know, are a crisis of today's society. Yeah.
And like with placemaking, and I know this isn't your area, so I'm probably stretching you a bit with thinking a little bit about technology, but it strikes me that's what we're trying to do now, but we're probably not getting it completely right. But I've seen like literally hundreds of churches posting online today. I saw New Life Church, New Life Baptist in DY, like they set their speakers up and all of that just down by the beach today, and they were a meter and a half apart, and the guy that leads it just said to me, we're just trying, like we don't really know what we're doing, we're just seeing how it goes and seeing how people respond, and it was generally positive. Online now we have you know, the reach of this video so far is 850 people. We have 163 engagements and 80 comments, so there's some kind of like placemaking, maybe I'm stretching your term slightly, like going on. Could you speak to that? Like how can we do that even better? How can we do that well?
I just think it's one part of a whole toolkit. And one thing where I'm doing some research with Macquarie Uni at the moment, one of the things that we're investigating is how to create community in high rises, because typically there is less community in vertical environments, and one of the aspects of the toolkit is how we create online communities. Those spaces are actually important to a culture of sharing, a culture of but I do think it's, I don't know, I guess I strongly believe that it's potentially unsustainable in the long term, but as the months go on, we do need to reconsider how we do church, like you were talking about, and how we form, I guess, a sense of belonging in other places.
It's good. Do the others want to throw anything in or ask a question?
Just quickly, I suppose at the moment I work out in Epping, where there's a lot of there's recent high-rise developments and others going on, and it's certainly an issue, and that's kind of where I'm trying to work out how to get those people out of that and involved in some sort of community. So that's the next step as far as I'm concerned in that space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a really challenging question, and the work that I'm doing is actually with Baptist Care in their aged care facility and the redevelopment that they're thinking of doing in Macquarie Park. So it's quite pertinent. I don't have the answers right now, and during this current context with COVID-19, I think particularly with the elderly, it's going to be really challenging. Whereas for younger generations, they're more tech savvy and they'll find connection online. But how we continue to bring that to elderly people in that space is really hard. And I'm not sure I have any answers.
And I don't know if this follows on, but Sally's asked an interesting question. And Sally, if I haven't got this quite right, just keep typing, because I think it's a great question. I think she's referring to now. So she says, panel, in our lives, can we meet other than online? Thoughts? So I think she's saying in the current situation we find ourselves now, or in 48 hours from now, can we meet anyway other than online? Like what are people's thoughts?
Well, I suspect it's going to be very much based on what's put in front of us by the government. So it might be that you can organise to walk down the aisle alongside of the aisle of Woolies if you arrange for somebody to be there at the same time as you. Obviously, there's not going to be cafes or any of that kind of space. If we don't go into complete lockdown, there's nothing to say you can't meet in the park, go for a walk. There are going to be opportunities for people within your neighborhood still, as far as I can see. In Spain, they've got lockdowns, but you're still able to walk your pet. So,
by a dog.
Sorry, walk your dog. But yeah, there's opportunities.
Yeah. Others, Lyndall, any thoughts? Kate?
Yeah, it's so tricky, isn't it? The parameters change so rapidly, don't they? And I think Andrew's right. We need to be wise, and we need to be listening to those that are providing us with that guidance and direction in that respect. But I think I'm not quite sure if Sally's referring to church, or just socially. But I think as church, we do need to think the online platform is not something that everyone connects with. And I think and if you think intergenerationally as well, what does that look like, and how do we, and thinking about worship as well, and the holistic nature of worship, all of us and our senses, how do we engage our 5 senses in worship, which is really important as well. So I think we're going to need to be really thoughtful about this stuff and creative. I don't have any magic answers. Sorry, Sally. But I think it's a changing landscape, and I think it's something that we do need to think about.
Yeah, and I'd love people to comment on that below as well. There's a couple of bits coming in. Someone said walking down empty aisles. Lauren's asked if anyone would wander down the empty aisles with her. In response to what Andrew said, but my hope is that we can, that we can do it. But like Lyndall said, and I've heard others say, this is such a fluid situation that we found when we took the difficult decision to move church to online this Sunday on Wednesday, that by the time we released the video, stuff had changed, and it was like, of course we were going to do that. At the time, it was something we weren't necessarily that keen to do. So and now, like, it seems like no churches are meeting, so it just changes so much every 2 days. But the dream and the hope of this stuff is that it will limit infection, that it will limit the spread, and that and there's that dream at the end that we will meet face to face again, and we'll be reflecting on that a bit in a few moments.
One thing that I'm thinking about is, like, so one of the phrases that we use is asset-based community development. And as a community, what assets do we have? Like, what can we leverage? So I guess we are uniquely positioned and quite privileged to have a wide community of expertise that, we're talking on this panel, and there are many others out there who have expertise that we can defer to in different situations. We have financial wealth amongst us, where we can be generous in different ways. We have large homes relative to many others around Sydney. What does it look like to use our space? And I don't have the answer, so that's a tricky one, because you can't invite people around. But like, just, I guess, focusing rather than on what we can't do, what are the things that we have in place, like technology, like our expertise, like our existing community, and the social connections and things like that. How can we use that to benefit others?
It's really helpful. And I think in a moment we're going to, I think that's probably a helpful point to move on to talking a little bit about the bigger picture, and just remembering that relatively, like, we are wealthy, we have a good health system in Australia and in the UK, where some people are tuning in from, like genuinely we're in good shape. There's a bigger picture, and we need to think carefully about how we distribute our resources, the assets that we have, not just financially, but in terms of our skills, just a couple that popped up, which the panel might find interesting, that were really helpful. Dave, Peter, we're going to get to your really good question in a minute, by the way, Dave. But you can walk along the beach a couple of meters apart and still have a good chat, as long as they haven't shut the beach, which happened at Bondi and apparently down at DY today as well. Someone else, Laura, a really great idea. She said one of her friends came and parked at the bottom of her drive with a takeaway coffee, and sat in the car, and then they managed to have a coffee together. And I just like I think that's an example of some of the creativity that's emerging at this time. And when we think about opportunities, you know, for the church to be creative, it's an opportunity for community groups to be creative. We do when we gather as friends, gather with each other. One of the things I love doing is telling stories and remembering stories and experiences that I'd had with other people. So I remember phoning my best mate up the other day and saying, mate, are you all right? You know, it's pretty rough over in the UK. They're probably a few days ahead of us. And he said, I'm fine. And then we just kind of slipped into sharing different stories and remembering things from a few years ago. And for me, that's like one of the senses of community. It's about sharing what's been, but then also creating new stories and thinking about what that looks like. So yeah, keep those ideas coming in. I'm going to read all these comments in detail at the end. We're now at 102, so forgive us if we're not picking up everything, but there's some really great engagement online, and I know Alex is on there as H3O official, just keeping an eye on it all. So we've saved the best till last. Andrew, do you want to share a little bit? See, I'll be nice to you now.
Yeah,
that was not British sarcastic humour. I was not being sarcastic.
Sure you weren't, Ricky.
Yeah. We'll let others work out that slight in joke. So just tell us a little bit about your background, because you've kind of lived a couple of lives. You're slightly older than the rest of us. Some people might notice.
And when Linda was talking about how she feels old before, and I was just shaking my head. But age is relative, Linda. So I suppose.
And you're doing a great job working the mobile phone, by the way. Like, I know it's a big thing for you.
Apparently, I heard today. I did listen to Trevor Noah, who I'm a great fan of as a comedian. He does a daily show in the States. He said he has just worked out that apparently you can use an iPhone to make phone calls. So for me, it's the other way around. So I suppose two things. I suppose for a long period of time, I was in banking and finance and in markets. So I think the COVID-19 is different, but I think I've been through 87, the 87 crash, early 90s in Australia, the recession, the Asian crisis. Even September 11 was a great had a great impact on markets, and obviously just a few years ago the GFC, and probably the GFC is the one that was closest to people's mind. And we have to remember that as a world we've been through lots of financial shocks, and this one's probably more substantial because it's having greater impact across much more things than the GFC. But after the GFC, you know, Spain, Italy, these countries had 30% unemployment. So these are things that the world's not a stranger to, just in the last, well, that's in the last decade. So I would, but I'm not glossing over the fact that people are going to have financial difficulties and this, that, and the other. But I think the important thing is to, if you're worried about your finances, if you're worried about your money, write down all the things that you might be worried about, the things you have an answer to. Write that. The things that you don't dwell on them. Put them aside and try to work back with them later. Work back with them. Talk with somebody else. Read what, you know. There's going to be help available in so many ways. The government, the banks, everybody's going to help. So don't. I suppose I'm just trying. Don't like panic. The word panic is being bandied around a lot, and it's natural. And money makes people worry. It's probably the second biggest worry after health. And so we've basically run into those two things at once. So it's something to be really aware of, that we have that we're going to have people who are going to be maybe unhealthy and financially unhealthy as well. So as a church, we just need to be around people, it doesn't mean like somebody's not going to be able to help within the church is going to be able to help somebody else financially, but they might be able to advise them. They might know somebody else, and that's the kind of this community that we need to build at this time. I suppose the other thing is I am now just a community organizer working for another church who I won't name because this is a.
Can we just go back?
Yeah.
Because that was yeah, because I think there's a lot in that, and I think what you're about to talk about, there's a lot in that as well.
Yeah.
So we'll do your interview in two parts because you're very special. Like I hear what you're saying around like, don't worry, and I think often one of the challenges around debt and the confusion about money is that people bury stuff and they just like take on more debt and just don't try not to think about the situation they're in. And I think that was what you were getting at. But what would you say to someone that is in that space at the moment when actually it's just really hard and they've looked at the government benefits and it doesn't look like they're going to get any because of their situation, or just off the back of the announcement today just feels really, really insecure and worried? Like, is it more complicated than you said? Like what would you say to that?
Oh, it's definitely more complicated. I mean, I go through it's a 60-second crossover. There, as Lyndall alluded to with mental health, there are organisations there that are able to help or able to provide advice, and it's probably one of those things that as a group for us to think about collating a list of those kind of organisations that can help. But I think individually your bank is the first port of call if you have problems. Then the government, they're all going to be there to help, and you just have to. But I think if you're feeling financial stress now, then you need to really start thinking about, well, what am I going to do? Because credit is, we are a country built on credit, and more personal credit than mortgage credit and things like that. And it's been a thing that's worried me a little bit over the last couple of weeks when people have been out panic buying, hoarding, whatever you want to do. I'm just wondering how people are doing that. How much of their toilet paper and pasta and rice and sugar is gone onto their credit card, and will come back to be a worry for them, and basically within the next 2 or 3 weeks when their bill comes. So my advice is there are things there to help.
Where you go?
Yep. It's just that I think to talk to somebody.
Yeah. I think that's right. Just don't suffer on your own. And I know there's some great organisations. Organisation in the UK, which is also in Australia, called CAP, which is Christians Against Poverty, and they're really great. And what they'll do is, if you're in debt, they'll negotiate with your debtors and make sure you don't pay any interest. They'll help you make a financial plan. And I know they'll be inundated at the moment, but also there's loads of resources on their website. So that's CAP, Christians Against Poverty, which is definitely worth looking at. And also, like, we'd love to hear from you, confidentially, like come and chat to us. And we really want to work out, particularly as a church, how we can serve one another at this time.
Can I just add something?
Some of us are in jobs that, thanks, Lyndall,
And I was chatting with Ains actually about this a couple of days ago. I think some of us are in a position where even though there are things that are locked down, that we will still continue to have a wage during this period. And there are some of us, there's many people that won't have that privilege and potentially have lost jobs as well, or will lose jobs. And I think for those of us that do have a wage that's going to continue through this, we need to be thoughtful about what we do with that, thinking about things like memberships or subscriptions or things that we do have, rather than cancelling those because those activities aren't going ahead. Considering continuing those. A lot of organisations and things are going to carry memberships over or carry credits over or things like that, rather than cancelling stuff. Actually think about, well, let's continue those things, and those things that we were going to book in, let's continue to book those things in, because we have our wages continuing. And I'm sure there's other things that we can be mindful of and how we're generous and wise with what we do have.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was in Girdlers earlier down on DY and chatting to the guy there, and he said it's really hard, and there's been a shift around of staff and all of that stuff. And he said, oh, one of the things, just like buy a voucher, you know, so if you go to a cafe regularly and you buy your coffee there, just go and buy like a gift voucher. You can often do that online, even with the smaller companies as well, even if we're in isolation, you can't get there or it's been closed. You'll be making a huge difference to them at this time. And of course, eventually you'll have an opportunity to have 2 coffees a day instead of just 1 or whatever it is. So yeah, just think mindfully about that. And we'd love people's ideas. And Alex, could you pin Dave's earlier question just to the top? I noticed you're doing that. It's really great, because I think we want to think about that and get people to respond online. We're covering a lot here, guys, and we're gonna run for maybe sort of 10-15 minutes more. It seems like there's good conversation online, so we're going to keep that going. But Andrew, do you want to just share a little bit about what you're doing now and your work worldwide?
Well, I suppose a couple of things. I am a community organizer for another church, and basically this has stopped everything. And I'm going through the same process of trying to work out how we can continue to engage with our community, which is, and a lot is around young families with young kids, and they're going to, when schools stop and everything else, they're going to be looking for things to do and trying to help be creative around that. The other space, I suppose, is the non-for-profit space. And interestingly, like I suppose this is a time when every country, this is one of those things that's going to affect every country, and obviously the poorer countries are going to be impacted more, because you've already alluded to ones who, like Australia and the UK and others, who have really good health system, and hopefully in most cases fairly well organised governments. And so there'll be countries that will really suffer as a result of this. The countries that would have suffered the same fate with Ebola and things like that, they will really come under pressure. And I suppose with what Linda was talking about, so I mean, those people who are going to still have a wage through all this period of time, they're $3.50 or $4 that they were spending a day on coffee. All that, you know, that we're actually, this will save money for those people. So think about what you might be able to do with that in some way, not all of it, just in some small way. If you already support a charity, a non-for-profit that works overseas, think about what they do and where you might be able to help them. So that would be my view on that space, I think.
That's really helpful. Does anyone want to add anything? There's a question that keeps emerging, and something we've been thinking about a lot as a church, which is how can we respond? And like we said, it's a fluid situation. We've named a couple of ideas. We had a staff meeting on Wednesday where we brainstormed this gathering and some of the stuff that we're going to be looking at, but also talked about how we could respond as a church. I got an email from Lauren Saunders, which is always nice to get, and she gave me a list of about 10 things. As a staff team, we came up with a list of about 10 things, and then we had another meeting on Thursday night, and the leaders of our 4 p.m. gathering came up with another 10-15 ideas. And really, before we get into discussing what they are, just to say as a church, the answer is yes to those ideas, as long as they're wise and not unhelpful, and no one gets hurt. We want to be a place, you know, the church can do community and communication well, and it's times we want to be a place that says yes to those ideas, because we think that the best ideas come from you. But why don't people just post some ideas about how we can respond below, and thinking about that, you know, in the Northern Beaches, but also beyond, thinking about some of the stuff Kate said about the resources that we have. How can we respond? Because there will be people that are currently paying obscene amounts of rent, and they won't be able to afford their rent in the coming weeks. I heard about a landlord who rang up their tenants recently and said, you know, are you in fixed jobs? Is your income changing? Can we reduce your rent this month, or come to some arrangement. There's still a lot there around capitalism, and we're not going to get into that discussion tonight. But how can we do small? Yeah, Kate, we're not getting into that. We'll say we've got next week. We can talk about that next week.
You can bring John on.
But,
you can bring John on, and
John
he'll have a good rant about socialism.
But that's a very small thing. But I think there's small things we can think about. But there's going to be people that are really struggling, that won't have somewhere to live. There's going to be people that can't get food in the coming weeks. Like, how can we respond as a church? Are there ideas from the panel, things that people have been thinking about?
I've been talking a bit to Luann, who is the Salvation Army minister down here in
right.
And things are changing really fast for her. So they have a soup kitchen, and they do community meals for homeless people, and they now can't invite them in to use the bathroom and have a shower and give them a meal and let them use the common room. They essentially have to pre-pack meals and pass it on and tell them that they then have to move along. They can't hang around. And so for her, I guess things are changing. She anticipates over the next few months that their food bank will need replenishment, and she said they're doing pretty well at the moment. They have enough supplies, but I think thinking about tin food and things like that, how you can donate that to your local food bank. There's one in DY on Pittwater Road that you could go to. And
whereabouts is that, Kate? Just specifically.
I'm not heaps good with DY, but it's so it's just slightly north of that main. What's the main?
It's near the chicken shop.
Yes.
Near Oporto.
Just north of the lighthouse on Pittwater Road. It's got 2 big red doors. And you can drop off food there. But for like homeless shelters are going to need a lot of help pre-packaging food. And that does mean coming in contact with people, but these organisations will still need volunteers. So if you have no one at high risk in your life, maybe that's something you could think about. Certainly that's what we've been doing. We're baking from home and taking food to Luann to hand out. There's an opportunity there. Yeah,
great. Kate, that's really helpful. So there's a couple of pieces there. Is there others that can add to that?
I think that maybe you alluded to before, Dan, about saying, like, obviously, if people want to talk confidentially, then because we can have an open forum, but there are people who are not going to talk about their issues in the open. So I think it's important for people within the church to realise that there are 2 or 3 people within the church who they can talk to confidentially, and that they will be able to help them out, or at least point them in a direction, or maybe have that conversation. Say, okay, well, you've talked to me about it. Would you be willing to speak to somebody else about that issue? So I think for people to be aware that there is somebody to talk to if they have that kind of issue.
Yeah, and I've just put my number below. If you want to ring me, I'm really happy to take your call and either help you myself or put you in touch with someone that hopefully you can. But also feel free to email in, or if you want to message someone else from the panel, completely fine to do that. So yeah, that's really good. Lyndall, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess just on the tail end of what Andrew's saying, we as a community, we want to hear what your needs are as well. And so please do reach out, for your needs. And we want to, as much as we can, we want to make sure that we are creating a safe space for people to feel okay to do that, and not just within our community, but within our streets and with our neighbourhoods as well. So, I guess that's the only thing I'd add to that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think in the coming weeks, we're going to be, and coming days, we're going to be posting some of this stuff online. And I'm really enjoying the interactions on this thread. So please follow some of them up. That would be really helpful. I was speaking to Dave Peter, who's commented a bit earlier, and he was saying about some of the places that provide Meals on Wheels are finding that for the elderly, are finding that their workers are either, like you said, living with someone who's at risk or are ill themselves and so can't go to work. And so if you're able to volunteer for something like that, then again, please get in touch. We're doing our best to try and kind of coordinate all of this stuff. And as we said, lots is happening very quickly. But I feel like we've got a good run at it this week, and we'll be working hard on that. The other thing we're going to try and do as a church is just contact each other, stay in touch with each other, maybe ring someone that you wouldn't normally ring, and just get in touch and just chat. You don't have to have a grand conversation. There's lots of suggestions on what you might talk about, but let's not disconnect at this time when this virus would seek to have us do that. Is there anything else anyone wants to add? We're going to finish with a reading from the Bible, and we're not going to try and tell you what we think the Bible's saying. We want you to go away and reflect and think about that yourself. But I'll give a brief reflection because I'm a priest and I just can't help myself. So do any of the others want to respond to or say anything else in the panel?
I would think that the best thing to try to do is to, along with everything else, is to read, be aware, but to try to keep your spirits. Don't just read terrible things. There are lots of funny. I mean, we talked about the toilet paper challenge and things like that. There are lots of funny things around. So just look for those things. Like I saw today, if schools are closed for too long, the parents are going to find a vaccine before the scientists. So there's a lot of out of adversity comes humor, and I think Australians are very good at that, and we shouldn't forget that. And not, as we said, let's not, if we go for a walk or a talk or you ring somebody up, don't spend 80% of that time talking about how bad COVID-19 is. Try to lift each other's spirits as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think that's the danger, isn't it? That we only see the bad news. We only talk about COVID-19. So let's try and appropriately be positive. Let's mourn with those who mourn, but also look for opportunities to be thankful and celebrate. And Linda, why don't you? Oh, sorry, Kate, you go. Yeah.
Sorry, just briefly. As Christians, we have a really unique message of hope, and I think, we shouldn't forget how powerful that is for other people and for ourselves. Yeah.
There's always a great analogy to the Christian faith, and that's in World War II when Stalin let everybody reopened all the churches because he knew that that people of faith are a lot better off than people without faith. So it's exactly what you're saying, Kate. It's there. We just need to make use of it.
Mm.
Thanks. Well, Kate and Andrew, you're right to just mute your microphones. We'd still love to see your faces for a bit. But Lyndall, do you want to read to us from Mark's Gospel? And just before she does, for those that aren't come to church every week, it's all good. You're so welcome. We believe that the words of Jesus do and will continue to change the world, particularly in these difficult times. Gandhi, not a Christian himself, said that the Bible has enough dynamite to blow civilization into a million pieces, but Christians treat it as just a book. So we're gonna hear a bit from one of the Gospels, Mark's Gospel, which is the shortest one. If you want to read a book while you're in isolation, then Mark's a really good place to start. Randomly, as Christians, we tell you to start in the middle or towards the end of the Bible rather than at the beginning. Send me an email if you want to chat about that. We can FaceTime or Zoom, and I can talk you through that. But the central message of the gospel is about the life and times of Jesus. So this is that, and this comes quite early on in Mark's Gospel. Mark just gets straight into it and starts telling the story. So reflection, then Andrew's going to pray, and we'll finish our time together for tonight.
All right, so for those that might be following along, I'm reading from Mark 2, starting at verse 1. A few days later, when Jesus entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now, some teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like this? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Immediately, Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts, and he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your mat and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat and go home." He got up, took his mat and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this."
Wonderful. Thanks, Lyndall. I went to Egypt many years ago for my honeymoon, which was a really bad idea because it was really hot. And we decided to go on a Nile cruise, which again was a really bad idea. And just to show how ignorant and knowledgeable about the world I was at the time, I thought going on a Nile cruise, we get to see the pyramids. But actually, if you go on a Nile cruise, you go to the Valley of the Kings and you see the tombs. So we didn't get to see the pyramids on that trip. But one of the things we did get to do as a wedding present, a really kind friend said to us, "You have to go on a hot air balloon trip because in Egypt, the weather's really consistent and you always get to go up." So we went on this hot air balloon trip. We had to get up really early in the morning, but it was wonderful. And we went on this trip over the Valley of the Kings where you can see Tutankhamun's tomb. But one of the things that interested me most amongst all these historic sites, as I said, I'm a very strange individual, was the housing in that area. Now, I know that Jesus wasn't in North Africa, but I think that the way they build houses is similar to how they were built in this time. And what I noticed was that you could see people inside people's houses as you went over the top on the hot air balloon. Because the weather's so consistent, because it's so hot, they don't have roofs on their house. And often they're waiting to build the next section in these kind of more rural areas. And so what you'd have is like the ground floor, a little roof over the top, and then the sides built on the top floor where most people slept. So as we got up early in the morning to go on this hot air balloon, we looked down and we could see people getting up in the morning. We were long enough away not to say anything inappropriate, but it struck me as really interesting. And when we read this story, when we hear from Mark's gospel, gospel literally means good news about Jesus and a life and the freedom that we believe he brings. They talk about these men so desperate to get to Jesus that they remove parts of the roof. And it would be very similar to that house that I've described. It would have been a house on 2 stories without a roof built on it, and Jesus would have been in the ground floor. And so they would have removed like these massive slates, these massive bits of wood just to get down to Jesus. They'd heard news of this guy. They'd heard really good things, and they had a friend who was sick, a friend who was struggling, a friend who was going through hard times. And they did everything they could to get them to this man, Jesus. They didn't know what would happen, but they knew if they got into Jesus, that maybe it would help, maybe something would shift, maybe something would change. Well, they take out the roof, lower the man down, and he lands at the feet of Jesus. The room's packed because people have come to hear the good news about Jesus and hear what he's got to say for himself. And so this man lowered literally at Jesus' feet, and Jesus says to the man, "Your sins are forgiven. Your brokenness, you're set free from your brokenness." Now, just to say, I don't have a right to tell anyone they're a sinner and suggest that anyone's broken. That's not for me to say. That's not what we're trying to do with this cast. But when Jesus says that, you're free from your brokenness, the teachers of the law, the clever people who have come to kind of check people out, get really annoyed. They're like, who is this Jesus? Like, why does he get to say that? And also his friends who have lowered him down to try and get him healed, to try and make him better, are also probably a bit surprised because they're thinking, I know Jesus in for him to be healed, but you seem to be talking about setting him free from his brokenness and not healing it. And then Jesus has a conversation with the teachers of the law and the people there, and says, is it easier for me to say to him, your sins are forgiven, or to get up and walk? But I say to you, get up and walk. And he heals him. The man's set free. He walks off through the crowd. He takes his mat with him and goes on his way. But it strikes me that in this story, two things happen. The man is set free mentally, emotionally, set free from his brokenness, and also set free from his physical ailment. As we face unprecedented times, as we face this incredibly complex, scary, and at times strange situation, we believe in a God that can heal. And that's really difficult to say, and that's really hard to talk about. But as Christians, if you're a Christian, if you believe this stuff, we have to pray for healing. We have to pray for people to be healed. But we also want people to be set free. And it strikes me that for Jesus, the first thing he does is set this guy free, to try and create an environment where he can be set free from his brokenness. These are broken and difficult times, and people need hope. And I believe as Christians, we carry that hope. We carry that hope of Jesus. We carry the hope of the one, as I said the other day on the video, who went through the most difficult times, who suffered as we do, and came out the other side. And so my prayer for you, if you don't come to church, is that you would explore some of this stuff. And if you want to talk to us, please do that. This isn't an opportunity for us to grow our church or try and get more people involved. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that this hope, this freedom that is found in Jesus can help us at this time. But also, if you're a Christian, I want to encourage you to pray for healing, to pray for our world, to pray for restoration, and to pray for hope. And more than that, put that into practice. You know, me and Alex talked the other day about loading up our car with as much clothes and stuff as we could and driving up north because it's hotter there and the virus doesn't spread in the same way. But that's not it. And she said to me, Alex is great. She said, we lead a church. Now, partly I was joking, but partly we all have that mentality where we want to run away. And we need to be wise. We need to be responsible. But as Christians, we are called to serve and love our neighbours and community. So I pray as we, in our really clunky and small way, try and work out how we do that, that we would all play our part. And I believe you can, wherever you're at, however difficult your situation is. We need you. The church needs you. And the world needs the church at this moment. The church is the hope of the world because Jesus is the hope of the world and he chooses to use us to be his people on earth. So it's been wonderful to be with you all tonight. We're going to close our live cast, but before we do that, I'm going to invite Andrew to read a really helpful prayer that's circulated around throughout the week. And once he's read that, we're just going to come offline. So thank you so much to my panel. Give us all a wave, and we'll see you all soon. Please stay in touch, stay safe, and stay connected. Andrew, why don't you lead us in a prayer?
Thanks, Dan. When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbours, a crowded theatre Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath a boring Tuesday in itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people that we wanted to be, we are called to be, we hope to be, and may we stay that way, better for each other, because of the worst. Amen.